he was encouraged to come to Lewiston and ride what was then relatively new, because this is August 18th. The system opened just a few weeks, a couple months before. So he came to Lewiston, and he got on the car while it was at the cart house on Middle Street. And in research, sometimes, you know, you see the front page, especially if it's like Theodore Roosevelt, second page, another story. But sometimes you find some interesting little tidbits if you go to the, what they call local interest. So I'm going through the local interest, and usually back then you read stories about, you know, Joan Smith's sister came to visit from Idaho. You know, so-and-so had a bean supper last night. He hasn't had one for 6 days. Or, you know, you just, the stuff, you just hear all these, it's like all the messaging from Facebook today, but it's all in print. And so I found this one story, and it talks about this guy from New York City, Mr. Corliss, who went fishing at Auburn Lake, caught an 8.5-pound lake trout, and presented it to Roosevelt while he's on the Narcissus waiting to leave. That's what that story is right there. It says, the Narcissus and they were waiting near the car. What do you think of that? Exclaimed Roosevelt. Isn't that bully? So it says, served for the, he says he figures he's gonna have it for breakfast the next morning. So now, when I see this picture, which is from that day, maybe 45 minutes later, after he has this trout, I'm thinking, where are they keeping that trout? It's on that car somewhere. So what prompted me to do the newspaper research, because I wanted to reach out to the Theodore Roosevelt Association because of the Roosevelt connection. Not necessarily for money, but of course that's always an option you try for, but just to get some credibility. If they were supportive of it, that develops some credibility. So this is a card, a picture from the Gray Historical Society. And the caption is, this is the Narcissus with Roosevelt on August 18th, 1914. So for me, to go and feel to the Roosevelt that I have evidence, I look at that and I go, okay, I can see the glass windows, definitely a Laconia built car. I can't see Narcissus. I can't see number 14 because the people are in the way. So yes, it absolutely could be the Narcissus, but it could be the Arbutus, it could be the Gladiolas, it could be the Clementas, because they're all Laconia built cars. So I said, for me to go to the Roosevelt Association and say, look at what I have. So I actually came to the Lewiston Library and did research, went to the Portland Library and did research. And all these different papers, it would usually use the phrases, and then he boarded the special car, and it would say Interurban or Portland-Lewiston. It wouldn't say a name or it wouldn't say a number. It would just say the special car. But one article actually said, in the first in the opening paragraph, it says he boarded a special car, Narcissus. So then I had it in print. And then that secondary story on page 6 with the trout, it talks about the Narcissus. He's on the Narcissus. The guy gives him the trout. He's just leaving, going to be leaving. So now I have that. So in reading the story, one of the, about that day when he rode the Narcissus from Lewiston, the New York Times also posted this story. And it was a side story about this young girl who was standing by the tracks with her mother, probably a 10-year-old, no names. And as the Narcissus approached with Roosevelt on it, going to Gray, because there's a fair number of people waiting for him at Gray, and that girl and the mother were standing by their farm, and she had a bouquet of flowers, and she wanted to give them to Roosevelt, but didn't want to go down into town. So the location, with research, our location, we're thinking that it's close in town, but not where the car had to come around the corner, slow down as it approached the brick building where the power station is in Gray. And probably what was going on is the August, and so it's hot outside. There's no air conditioning in these cars, but they would leave the doors open. Those, whoops, I keep pushing the wrong buttons. They would leave the doors open because they could lock those sort of in place, these doors, and windows could be opened up some. And so probably as the car was going by her on the tracks at a fairly slow pace, because they're coming right into town, and she saw the front door open, she's maybe thinking, maybe I can just toss this bouquet into that other open door. So she starts walking towards the car as it's moving, and Roosevelt, this is what's in the paper, Roosevelt, looking out the window at her, sees her walking towards the car, jumps out of the seat, runs to the back, probably concerned about her safety, you know, and goes to the open doorway, and they transfer the flowers. I read that story, I was like, how cool is that? And so, so then I go research. He came back in 1916, also did a trip on it, Interurban. We didn't know which one at the time. Wasn't in the newspapers at the time that I could find. But he was going from Portland in the opposite direction, up to Lewiston. And as he approached Gray, his staff reminded him of the young girl from 2 years before that had given him the bouquet of flowers. And so when they stopped in Gray, he yelled out to the crowd, "Is the young girl here that gave me that bouquet of flowers to you?" And it was silence. I was like, oh, darn, who is that? So that was really the first thing that got me going about that could be a story, a book, or something. So when Gene and I met up and started talking about this book, I reached out to the Gray Historical Society, and they put together an interview for us for 3 ladies. One was at the time 90, one was 96, one was 98, one was 100. And they had all grown up in Gray, and they had all ridden the Interurbans. So we're thinking maybe we're going to find out. Maybe it's a sister, maybe it's an aunt, maybe, who. And so there's all, and family members of these people were there, stuff. And it didn't happen. There were some interesting conversations. It's all recorded, and all that stuff. And the 100-year-old, her niece was there. And her niece lives in Florida at the time. So she went and had lunch with a high school classmate of hers like a couple days later, and so they're talking, she was saying, what an exciting time we had, the stories that these gals had, what lives they led and all that stuff, but geez, we didn't find out. And so she tells a story, and her high school friend goes, I know who that is. My brother is married to the, and so we learned who it is, but not until we'd already got the book, going. And so it's Marguerite Thayer Morrow Duplessis. And so you can see she was born in 1903, so in 1914, she would have been, around 10 years old. And as it turns out, one of her granddaughters during middle school had her granddaughter do a play reenacting what happened back like in the 60s. So we connected with the family, but there was no, I'll say, direct feedback. So we just moved on. So Gene and I go to the State Social Studies Teachers Convention in Augusta when the book first came out. Only been out maybe a week or so. And we have a table set up, and I have that caricature of Theodore Roosevelt, on the floor. So during one of the intermissions, a teacher is approaching us. She got her name tag on, and she points to Roosevelt. She goes, "When my great-great-grandmother was a young girl, she gave a bouquet of flowers to Theodore Roosevelt." Honest to God, I looked over at Gene, I looked back, I picked up a book, I said, "Marguerite Duplessis?" She goes, "How do you know that?" I said, "Well, this book is about your great-great." She goes, "I have her wedding dress. I have all her journals. She was a teacher in Gray, New Gloucester, and all, and that."